I'm really excited to have my first guest. On Gary Darnell, and Gary is the Associate Executive Director of the American Football Coaches Association. And Gary's coached college football for more than 30 years, including stints. He's been an interim head coach at the University of Florida, at Texas A&M University. He's also been a head coach at Tennessee Tech, and also when I worked with him, he was a head coach at Western Michigan. Gary's had a lot of stickers on, or has a lot of stickers on his bag. He's had career stops at the University of Texas, at Notre Dame, Wake Forest, North Carolina, SMU, Oklahoma State, where he played, and then even had a stop here at Kansas State. One of the reasons that Gary is such a wonderful fit for this podcast is that he's been in a position of leadership most of his career. He's been a head coach, an assistant coach, a defensive coordinator at 8 different universities. I also had a great privilege of working along Gary when he was at Western Michigan. So Gary, welcome, and let's just jump right in.
Thanks for asking me. Coach Malone, and former Van Malone, A player, run harder, run faster. Coach Malone, I really appreciate the opportunity to visit just a little bit.
Thank you. So let's talk about this, Gary. In your role today at the AFCA, what steps do you take to make sure that projects are completed on time and on budget and to the proper standard? Now I ask you that question, but then I also kind of want you to go into how does that transfer from your roles as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach?
Well, thanks. You broke up on asking the question just from the very start again. I'm sorry, I lost you.
So what I'm asking you is, as you operate in your role today, you have projects that you have to get done, and they should be done in a timely manner. And then you have budget situations that you have to deal with. How do you make sure that things are done in a timely manner in your role today? And then how does that correlate to what you did when you were a head coach, when you were a defensive coordinator, when you had to have projects completed, things that you were in charge of? How does that correlate to what you have to do today?
I think everybody, the simplistic answer, you always have a plan, but that plan has to be coupled with direction. The players and the coaches and your whole organization has to understand what it is you're trying to get done. And so communications for me was always just critical. It's like, I don't know if I ever had a staff meeting that I didn't go in, that all my notes wasn't there in front of me. We did it. We went through it. I didn't waste people's time. And then whatever permanent issues that were there, we went through them. And then I even had it, I tell you, in my interim time at the University of Florida, for the 1 year there, when I started staff meeting in the morning, it began with everybody, secretaries, everybody. And then, to touch base, because it was, a little bit of volatile time. So we would touch base and what to do. And then as it would come down to it, well, then at once, a piece of information had been discussed, well, then, say the secretarial staff didn't have leave. And then we'd take a medical report, and then so that everybody could hear it. And then they would leave. And then it would be, whatever it is, the scouting reports or whatever, that would go, and the GAs and the analysts, the people, they would leave. So the point being is that, the communications is just critical in how you do it, and being clear and precise is paramount.
Okay. Now, of course, I work with you. You were the head coach at Western Michigan, but when you're the head coach, you're responsible, and you alluded to this earlier, you're responsible for the entire team. Your actions, they affect the players, they affect the coaches as well. How would you describe your leadership style? And then how would your colleagues describe it?
look, you can tell me if I'm right on this because you served in both roles of it, but it's pretty simple in my mind, and simplicity is always something big in my mind. But I think, without a doubt, my management style was firm, fair, and you cared. And then there was that had been a tough love. That was just a part of the game. So I think if you're firm with what you say and you're fair in what you say and you really care and they know that you care, then when it comes to tough love, that's how you can communicate with each other.
And I can attest to it as a player, and then as a coach working on your staff. I would say that you were always that firm, mostly firm, and fair. So let's talk about tough love. If you have a staff member who is underperforming, what steps do you take to improve that person's performance as a leader?
I think when you do that, you call the guy in and you start it off as a we problem. It's like, we got a problem. I think we got a problem. And then you kind of put out there what is, you work through it. And then you get it down to it's a you problem. Okay, so you got a problem. So what is that problem? And then you work through that. And once you go through that, then you come back to the we problem again. So I think it's a process. We got a problem, your problem. Let's talk about it, and then we'll get it back to a we problem. Because I always felt like if I was a leader in my organization, someone had a problem, I wanted to help be part of the answer.
So I've had the opportunity here at Kansas State to work with Coach Kleiman and be in this assistant head coach role. And, when you're the head coach, you sit in that seat and everybody has the answer. You know what I mean? Everybody can tell you what you should have done, and everybody has an opinion on how you should have handled a certain thing or another. And so I've really had an opportunity to see what he deals with. But for you as a head coach, I would like to know what was the toughest decision that you've had to make, right? What was the toughest decision that you had to make, and how did you decide upon the action that you finally took?
Well, this is on a much lower level or a different level you're talking about, but just as far as, when you make a decision, are you propelling yourself, or are you moving yourself to doing what's right? And I'll give you a do-right story. But this was back in the 80s, and our first years in Texas. And when those days, University of Texas, in those days, you still had training camp where, and you had coaches living in the dorm, and you had curfew, you had all that stuff. Well, so we had curfew, and one night was my time to do it, and I was really coached on the staff. And so I found four freshmen. So four freshmen come walking in, and they were about 30, 40 minutes late. And I was standing there waiting on them, so I had to talk to them and that, whatever. And so first thing, I was staff meetings next morning. So I finally said, okay, look, I've got to tell y'all, here's what happened last night. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was because they violated a curfew thing, and that was in some ways. But so the head coach was John McVick. He said, okay, we're going to deal with it. Thank you for telling us that you didn't try to protect these guys. Didn't baby around. Well, I think it worked out all right. Out of those four guys I just mentioned, there was one All-American, there's one All-Pro, two All-Pros, there's a Heisman Trophy winner. And those guys they did pretty well. Ricky Williams, Priest Holmes, Bryant Westbrook, Trey Thomas. I mean, it was so that was I think that justifies your level of performance doesn't protect you doing what's not right.
Right.
As a player.
Well, I think that you and I have had many conversations over the years about this topic, the topic of leading from the front. And so what I like for you to do is just take me through what that means, leading from the front.
Well, it's leading from the front. For me, I think as a young buck, when you first start coaching, you do it because you want to show the players you can do it. Watch me or whatever. And I think that's okay. But, I tell you, as you go a little older, that gets a little tougher to do. So, why is it important to lead from front? For me personally, because I think the players, your troops or whatever, need to be able to see you out there and that you're there with them. And then you didn't just delegate. You didn't delegate for them. You're part of the answer. And I just wanted to, I'm probably one of those kind of guys that I want everybody to know you can lean on me. And that's the way I was raised, and that's the way I always kind of managed.
Right. Like I said, we've had many discussions in that way. It's really easy to jump out there and do the drills when you're young. But as you get older, it's a little bit more difficult. So as a matter of fact, in one of the workouts here recently, my player challenged me and said, "Coach, why don't you get out here?" I said, "Listen, man, it's my job to direct you, and I'll get out there in certain situations, not this one." So, as a leader, Gary, we sometimes want to do it all, right? And I get chastised by my wife, and I'm sure you get chastised by your wife, Sandra, about the fact that we have to delegate missions at times. Explain to me your approach when it comes to delegation.
There's delegation for me was a staple of my organization, and I always ran for it because you got to, your organization, first of all, your basic structure needs to be sound and those sort of things. I think just the fundamental sound stuff, a person could actually read a book and figure that out. But the delegation of it is, in today's society, particularly today's game, my career transcends about 4 decades, so let's be real here. And what I learned from era to era to era to era, but the era that's being lived in now, you have staffs with 100 people on. You can't run all that. You even have guys in major clubs that have actual general managers. And it's like, wait a minute, general manager in college football, where you got some different aspects. So point being is that there's so many facets of it, you can't do that. So how well you can take it truly is like being a leader, a military leader, and things divided up into different segments, and everybody's got to be able to depend on your segment doing it, even though they're not watching. So I think, I think it's a little bit ludicrous to think that you can micromanage everything. So you have to be able to delegate. And then when delegate, the first thing that comes up is you hire someone that has the ability to do it. And then number two, can you trust them to do it? Can they do it? So I think, knowledge and then the actual assignment of that and the execution of it, that's why you have to delegate.
Well, I go back to one of the staff book assignments that we had at Western Michigan. It's the book is Be No Do, and it's written from the U.S. Army leadership manual. And I learned so much from that book. I always refer to it, and it goes back to the topic of delegation. And the book talks about if you have a private, and I'm just going to use him as a lower rank in a squad, if you have a private in a squad and the squad leader goes down and he's never been trained, he's never been given the opportunity like you talked about, he's never been given the opportunity to do things, to operate. When the leader of the squad goes down, you got a problem. And so, like I said, I always refer to that book. You didn't think I still had it, but but I do.
Yeah, I think about it, man, sometimes because when you train your players, me, it's be like I was in the Air Force, so you train pilots. Well, you know, it's really important that you train a pilot really well, because when you get up there, the power goes off and the right wing shot off, that sort of thing. What do you do? Well, you got to learn to be able to do things for yourself. And if you don't delegate, I mean, to me, that's part of the big learning process for all of it. College, collegiate athletes. Like you're teaching them to learn, and then you're letting them. What you got to do is let them try out what they learn. And if you don't delegate, I mean, I'm talking players, so you got players committees or whatever, but you got coaches. Because I give you a really good example. When we was playing, I was at Notre Dame. We was playing Michigan. The opening game of the season. Whoever wins that game that night is going to be number one in the country. And so all my guys, I got my set up and doing all that stuff that you do. 3 minutes and 2 minutes, a little less than 3 minutes left on the first half. Our whole communication systems went down, and I was not able to talk to anybody. And that was the year that they came out and introduced their no huddle offense. And so I was standing there by myself with no one to talk to. So my point being is, but I had been along the way. I had been taught to learn to do things. When it's just you got to bid on, you can do it. And because people delegated things for me to do along the way, and I learned. If they hadn't, I wouldn't have learned.
Well, and I think that goes to a great point about your career when you study your own career. And I'm sure you haven't studied your own career, but I have. And, you've been a head coach. You've been a defensive coordinator. You've been a position coach. And you've also been an analyst, right? So you've been a GA. So you've taken the football coaching world, you've taken every step that you can take. And so when you talk about delegation, when you talk about having an opportunity to do, to learn, to develop, you've done it all.
Well, I feel fortunate along those lines. Coach, it's just I would, as far as, I'm going to hope there's some young coaches listening on as we're doing this with anybody. But it was always important to me to make sure I understood the whole big picture. I coach on both sides of the ball. I like to think I'm a defensive guy, and I am a defensive guy. But for me to understand defense, I had to understand offense. And so when I went to the University of Texas, I went there to work with the offense. I was going to be the running backs coach, and I never coached running backs. But I wound up being the special teams coach, the tight ends coach, which was perfect for me because that special teams was special. But the tight end coach in that particular system made me learn the passing game and protection systems. And because of that, then when I went back over on defense, I understood. And I think it's real important, that offensive guys working. If I was an offensive aspiration guy, I'd want to work with defensive coaches. If you ask an offensive coach what to do, they're going to give you the same reason that you do. But if you want to find out what your reasons and why you should go about it some way, work with the other side. I really believe one of my building stones in anybody's career or overall knowledge is work on the other side of the ball sometimes so you can get both perspectives.
I think that is very true. I had the opportunity at your encouragement to take a job at North Dakota State coaching the wide receivers. And it gave me a very different perspective, as I coached the DBs. Now, there were some real arguments in the staff room because the offensive coaches would always want to tell me what the defensive guys were doing over there. And so I'd say, no, that is not cover two. So it ended up, but it ended up really being a great learning experience.
I'm such a big believer in that because I had really thought, okay, and if I was in today's world, if I was to go back to coaching tomorrow, I would hope I could go be an assistant to the receiver coach because the passing game, where it's come to and all that sort of thing, and then not to diminish what's going on with the running game either because of the zones and all, and how, things. You think about the differences of how it's done now. The point being is that it is so removed from maybe some of the fundamentals are always fundamentals, but yet schemes, you need to be able to understand what are they trying to do over there. But if you can't understand what they're trying to do, then what are you going to do to stop it?
Right. So let's shift gears to, well, not really, but I want to know, we all study, and I know you are a study of great leaders. What great leaders inspire you?
I'm going to just do this from a sports sense, okay? I mean, as far as public figures and those sort of things, Will Rogers would be one of my all-time favorites, but you don't even know who Will Rogers is. But from a sports sense, there was Jim Weaver, who was the athletic director, hired me at Western Michigan. He and I had a background through the University of Florida and went on. And so I acquired Jim because he was an athletic director, but he also, because he'd been a football coach and played at Penn State and that sort of thing, he had a sense for all the things that you have to deal with. And then he had a good business sense doing that. Another guy in the exact same, a little different boat, was the Lost Dodge. The Lost was our athletic director at Texas, but he also was our athletic director at Kansas State. And I knew him before that when he was working in the old Big 8 office, and Kansas City is my recruiting area, so I would go I would meet him at a track meet or something. And I got to know the law, and just utmost respect. And then he winds up, coming from those beginnings to being the athletic director of Texas, which is, the wealthiest, one of the most powerful athletic departments in the country. And then as far as one other guy I would toss out there, and I really listen out there. I think if I was a young coach, I would hope someone would tell me, you need to study John Wooten. And John Wooten was the basketball coach at UCLA. He won 7 straight national championships there. And to read him, the humble beginnings that he started his coaching career, but the humble basic fundamentals that he used to win championship after championship after championship was incredible. So I give you stories why I particularly like John Wooten, but I would find out about John Wooten, how he thinks or how he thought.
Great. Now, I've heard many stories from coaches that you've worked with over the years, but of your past head coaches, right, the ones who you work with, who were the greatest leaders amongst them, or your favorites amongst them?
I felt that, and I want you to know that's a really hard question for me to answer because I think I've worked with 12 different head coaches. So, and every one of them had their strengths, and almost none of them were the same as far as what they were. And so what is it about a head coach that you're looking at, or what is it? I think in my estimation, what it was wanting from a head coach, and to lead you in a way to be the best you be. And so I'm talking about players, I'm talking about coaches, and I think it's an endless conversation to do it that way. But I would think one thing I would say about, when you have a relationship with coach, it's important. I think sometimes you may not like the guy that well, but the thing that you got to do is you got to respect him and support his position, and that's the most important thing. And because I've got just great coaches, and but to say one and leave the other one out, it'd be hard for me to do. But whether it's from Lou Holtz to John Macvick to like some of favorites, because he's a lot like Bill Dooley. I know in Carolina, we University of North Carolina, we won lots of games, won championships. But we knew what we were being led. We knew how that part was working out. Galen Hall was an incredible coach because, first of all, Galen probably one of the winningest college coach ever at any level, because he played at Penn State. He was an All-American. They won national championship. Oklahoma, he was there for years, won national championships. Florida. We won that. He went on to the one of the pro leagues, and he won that year. Gale knows how to win, and so and to know him as a person, his demeanor was special because Gale basically handed it to you. He gave you the keys to the car and says, "Be sure and get us back home." And so those folks, but it's really hard for me to pick one guy because the strengths. I'd have to tell you the strength. Dave Smith, when I was at SMU in Oklahoma State with him, we were probably more progressive than anybody I'd ever seen. He was so far up to, even though that was still the wishbone days. But the things that he added to the programming, from him I learned to be progressive in my thinking. So I mean, each guy you take something away from, you take a little something with it.
Well, I tell you, as you're talking, I'm thinking about our time together, not when I was a player, but when I was a coach. I even go back to the time when I was a player, but most specifically, I remember times when we were together at Western Michigan. Now, those were not the most fruitful years, right? We didn't win every game, but the thing I always remembered is that Coach Darnell, as a leader, like you alluded to a minute ago, is we had the staff meeting, and everyone in the staff meeting knew exactly where they stood. They knew exactly their mission within the organization. But I think it's easy to coach during the good times. It's very easy to coach during the good times. I feel so blessed because I had the opportunity. Maybe you don't feel blessed during this time because we didn't, like I said, we didn't win every one of our games. But I had the opportunity to be with you in a trying time. And to me, that's when I measure the leader. That's me personally, me as a young coach. I gained so much respect for you during that time because every day you came in with the same work ethic. Every day you came in with the same directives. Every day you came in and you put the same challenges in front of the coaches. And no matter how bad it might have gotten, I never saw you waver in who you were as a coach, and who you were as a man, and who you were as the leader of the organization. So I still and I continually hope that I pray to uphold that standard that you put into me as a young coach.
One of the things I don't know how I put this out there with you, but for me, it is so important for coaches to understand that it's the players' time. They only get 4. You can coach for 40 years, but you only get to play for 4. It is their time, and it's your job, and what you should be doing is making sure they get the most maximum optimal opportunity and that you can have as a player. And it's kind of like, the what their players have to do. The thing that breaks my heart about all it's their time, and they're going to lose some of their time. But when a coach change, when say a staff change comes in, whatever, it was important to me to make sure the players I inherit, that they understood that it's their time. This is their time to play college football, and we got to maximize that as well as you can. Well, coach, I feel like it's the same way. It's your time, and I mean, you don't know, but I coached Kansas State.
Yeah.
When we took it, at the time, this is all, but it was the losingest program in the history. I mean, and we got to put on the probation that we inherited. We didn't do it, but we inherited was the second worst probation in the history of college football. And so we didn't get practice. We didn't get half spring practice. And then the next year they hadn't won a game in 3 years, and we won 4 first year theirs. How does all that come together? I think it's accepting and realizing and telling people and saying, look, man, this is your time. You can use it or any way as you see fit. But if you wanted to maximize it for you, it's your time. But if you take away from other people's time during this time, then it won't be your time. You've got to be part. So everybody gets to have their time. Players, mostly, coaches will come and go, but it's still, it's their time.
So you've had the opportunity, like we talked about, to be at a lot of places, to lead a lot of young men, to lead a lot of coaches. How have you over the years set up measures for yourself to evaluate your performance as a leader?
I think I do that. I do it subconsciously. Well, I know I do it subconsciously because, it's not so much, my perspective is I want to be the best coach that they ever had. So I'm working for them. So what can I do? And, that's where the decisions as a coach, or a teacher or leader, period, how much do you give to them? Let them do it, and how much do you push them, or you pull them, or you push them? How you get them through there? And I don't know, Coach. I just really want to get to where I surround myself with people that they can really believe in themselves, and they certainly know if they got a problem, who they can go to help help with that problem.
One of the things that I learned from you is that triangle, the triangle of relationships: the coach to the coach to the player, and the player to the player. And I think that's been instrumental in my development as a coach. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about when you have stepped into a new role, when you have stepped into a position as a new head coach. What is the first thing in that place, in that position? What is the first thing you think that a new head coach has to find out about his team?
I think, well, yeah, I think, and I know, but I want to know their level of confidence. I want to know, what are we dealing with here? These guys, are they broken? Are they lost? Are they overly cocky? Whatever it is. I just want to know what their level of confidence is, and how you do that is. I can do that, and I ask the question, can we win, or whatever, why can we win? Just point questions to find out. But I want to know how confident they really are. Are they just kidding themselves, or they, is this just a party gathering for them? And then the next thing I'd want to be able to do is be sure and then figure out their level of desire. Generally that comes in, the conditioning and that sort of thing. But it actually comes up with, whatever the rules that fit, that particular university, where, make sure that those rules are known, and then see how they handle it. But what is their level of desire, and how good they want to be? And that's okay. And I think, the one thing through that, you've got to be able, this is in recruiting anytime, but you got to know, do they want to win? Because if they don't want to win, it doesn't, that changes the scheme. And just so I will say this, because I'm very adamant about the fact that the things that I say about what I'm saying pertain to college football. I don't think it pertains to high school football, because you don't get to choose your players. My whole management style with a high school team would be different, because you don't have a choice. You don't recruit those high school players. They're there. So it's, I have a special place in my heart for high school coaches and how they go about it. But back to college coaching, you've got to find out, but you've got somebody there, and you're giving them a scholarship or whatever else, and they don't want to win, or they don't do that, or you really got a problem. So do that. And then, so with that, and then this always goes right. I'm a third generation black disciple guy, but will they take coaching?
Right.
Do they want to be? Will they accept your coaching? Where are they with that? Because if they don't want to be coached, they got all the extras, and they just changed that, got another coach prior. Well, I just need to know, will they take our coaching?
Right. One of the things we used to say all the time when I stepped into a new job, I would say, listen, if your way worked, I wouldn't be here. Well, so you've taken this new job. Are there any things, are there any things that you as a new coach, you feel like you have to get changed or implemented immediately?
Well, no, because I got to see what I got, and if I've got, I mean, if I, once you wind up with that job, the guy leave or the head coach or whoever you are, why, first of all, why are you even there? What caused, what happened for that spot to be open that you're there now? And once you find that out, then that you know that if it's because the other guy, did really well, he moved on, or the guy really bad and got fired. Why did he get fired? I mean, there's so many things into it. So, but it goes back to, what I said a little earlier, when you go to a new job like that, how these guys think, what they take coaching, do they want to win, and just see where they are with the real picture. Maybe where are they with reality? And I think that might be the key word right there, is that there's a reality to what it really takes to win at certain levels, certain schools, whatever. Are they living in that reality, or are they just living a dream? I think I would tell you, so it's one of the things that was always, and still is to this day, and so it's just one of those irked little things when coaches refer to college guys as kids. And so here's the reason why. When I was that age, we were in the Vietnam War. Sending kids to the Vietnam War was not a good idea. You train them to be men. And I think that's your job. You train them to be men and accept and understand decisions and responsibilities and realities, and those sort of things. So all of that to me is coaching. Getting a guy to accept responsibility, understanding realities. I don't live in a dream world, live in a real world, and so that you can have real solutions.
I just got a couple more, and really one of them is a serious question because of the time that we're in, right? Dealing with COVID-19 and the stressors of that. How do you think you would handle coaching and operating in this environment, the COVID-19 environment, the environment of uncertainty? Are we going to play or we're not going to play? We're going to play conference games. How do you think, as a head coach, you would handle this time, these moments with your team?
Well, this is probably how to answer the first part of it anyway, is that, it's always communications. And to what I see, everybody's trying to do the very, very best they can to say, well, what's real today, and try to keep determined as much as possible. What's the real answer? Because you can get so many mixed messages now. But then I think that given the environment, I would be adamant, is the responsibility of each player. And I really get confused when, I see these antagonist people who don't want the problem's not as real as they want to accept. But there's a real problem out there. And so you accept that. And I just, I think everything you can do to create honest, real data for them that they use, and then, have them held responsible. I want them to understand they got to protect their brothers. They got to protect each other. And by doing that, that's how they do their social lives. They do those things. And then as far as the mental rest on stay close. The worst thing in the world after this pandemic, one of the best things in the world is technology. They can call each other. They can see each other. They can do like you and I are doing right now. So it's not like, I go back, remember, I spent 4 decades, is that, you never saw your teammates in the summer, and you didn't see them until you showed up for training camp. And, that's so, but now this day and time, the opportunity to stay close and make sure if you're taking advantage of that some way, keep them close. Keep them informed, keep them close.
I think it's important what you said, and you said it all along, is communication, is making sure that the lines of communication are open throughout this process, because, you know, you said what's real today, and the virus and the way we approach it, the way we handle it, some of those measures have changed over the course of time. And it's just because we're learning day by day. But I think communicating with your team is big time important. So like I said, I just got one more question. And this one is a little bit fun, I guess. But the question that I have for you is, of all the places you coached, of all the environments you've been in, which game day environment has been most amazing for you?
Ooh. Well, can you hear me? That's too hard. It's really, I mean, if you're talking Notre Dame, you're talking Texas, you're talking Oklahoma State. I mean, you're talking some really Carolina, some really. But I would probably have to. I mean, just as far as electricity, Florida was pretty interesting.
Okay.
It was Gator Fest from the second you walked down the field. It was Gator Fest, you know, and the stands. And see, that's one thing. The stands come right up. I mean, the people are sitting right behind you. I mean, they're talking to your players, but they're also talking to the visiting team's players too.
Yeah.
So the environment there was the most electric atmosphere I had ever been into. I had been in Kansas. It was the last of the year, and we were playing Kansas and Kansas State. I mean, the stands was packed. I mean, you're going to see that. But the stadium was big, but it was packed. People were standing on the sidelines, and then towards the end of the game, I was standing on the sidelines, and I looked up, and there was about 4 or 5 couples, you know, young college kids with college people. They're on their sidelines, just, you know, hey, this is great. And I had one of my microphones that here, you want to call plays?
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully they didn't do that. So here's a question, and this is a coach question, because we get so much more out of it than people ever recognize, than people would ever realize. My question to you is this: in your career, has there ever been a time where the season was not going great, things were not going great, but you felt really gratified because of the work you were doing as a coach, as a leader?
I can't give you a better example than I was the head coach of Tennessee Tech. And off of that staff, I've had national. I mean, I've got guys who are in College Football Hall of Fame, guys who won the national coaches of the year 2 or 3 times. There's like 6 or 7 head coaches off of that different staff. And so, but where my gratification came is that you take the coaches, but if you look and see the players, and we didn't win a game. We won 2 games, maybe. And I was awful. I was an awful head coach. But our players and our coach, we have guys off that team that were the lead astronauts. You know, you got guys who are CEOs of major large companies and the corporations in the world. And so the gratification for me has always been that you know, these guys work for you. And so if they work for me, then I work for them. And I think that the balance going back and forth between they work for me, I work for them. You keep all that going and keep it honest, and really keep it honest, even in the tough times. This is a cliche, but you know, the times have passed. But I can tell you, one of the closest staffs and people was the Tennessee Tech staff, you know, and because you know we endured a lot of things, or they did, and so I think it's the way are so valuable. And you need to reminisce to yourself sometimes, make sure you don't forget those lessons.
Well, Coach, man, this has truly been an enlightening experience. And I say it's been a blessing. We just got leadership from one of the greatest coaches, in my opinion, to roam the sideline. And I think that's fabulous. So, Coach, I appreciate all that you do, all that you've done. And I'm always, like I said, gratified to spend time with you because I learn more and more every day.